Hello, I'm Louisa Arnold, president of the Gilbert and Sullivan Light Opera Company of Long Island. Wishing you a belated happy Sullivan's birthday and welcoming you to our presentation of Very Truly Yours, Gilbert and Sullivan. Our company is currently in its 67th season. Last year was a year we won't soon forget. Our production of The Mikado had to be postponed, but look for it in 2022. We ended with a year that included only a handful of our review show, Very Truly Yours, Gilbert and Sullivan, which took place in January and February. It was the first year since 1954 that we didn't present a fully staged GNS opera, but that didn't stop us. You are about to view a special, socially distanced, all digital version of Gayden Wren's play, Very Truly Yours, Gilbert and Sullivan, which was originally presented by the company in 1995 and since then has been seen off Broadway and in productions by other companies around the country. And just to make it more fun, we decided to invite not only our current members, but members from throughout the company's history to participate in this very special show. We have 51 years worth of company members involved in this show you are about to see, and we hope you'll enjoy them all. There are way too many to mention, but we have an online program available on our website at www.GaSLOCoLI.org with program bios, author notes, more information on Gilbert and Sullivan, and much, much more. As I mentioned before, the Mikado will be coming to stages all around Long Island in 2022, so make sure you get your tickets. And in the meantime, director Alex Sheeran is working on Trial by Zoom, an all-new take on the GNS classic Trial by Jury. We hope you join us for that because that's going to be a fun event. Lots and lots and lots of fun on that. You'll hear more about that and all the upcoming events from the company if you're on our email list. One other thing, this movie is going to be right there up on YouTube for a while. So if you know someone or anybody that's interested and you think they're going to love this show, please tell them about it. Go to GNS, tell them. Even if they're not a GNS fan, let them know about the movie and let them purchase a ticket, let them watch, let them be a part of it, all right? I can tell you a little bit more about the show, but guess what? There are a few of our young members right here waiting to get the show started. So I think it's time. Enjoy the show.
Hello, we're the Cratchit Kids from a Gilbert and Sullivan Christmas Carol.
Some of them, anyway.
I was Peter.
And we're here to welcome you to Very Truly Yours, Gilbert and Sullivan.
A play that doesn't have any parts for kids.
You'll hear some songs by Gilbert and Sullivan, but this isn't a play by Gilbert and Sullivan.
Actually, it's a play about Gilbert and Sullivan.
It doesn't have any parts for kids.
For those of you who may not know very much about Gilbert and Sullivan, we thought we'd give you a little background information.
W.S. Gilbert was born in 1836.
That's 184 years ago.
The W.S. stood for William Schwenk.
Schwenk was a German name from his mother's side of the family.
Gilbert hated it.
His mom and his two sisters always called him Schwenk.
When Gilbert was growing up, he almost never talked to his mom and two sisters.
When he talked to his mom, he called her Madam, not Mom.
Arthur Sullivan was born in 1842.
That's 178 years ago.
His middle name was Seymour, but he didn't use it.
He didn't like his initials.
Neither of them had kids.
Gilbert had an adopted daughter.
She was grown up when he adopted her. That doesn't count.
Gilbert wrote the words, and Sullivan wrote the music.
Between 1871 and 1896, they wrote 14 operas together.
Actually, it's more like 13 and a half.
None of which had kids in them.
There's a paid-for in the sorcerer.
What does he do?
He says, he's in the tent, sir, refreshing.
That's all?
That's all.
He doesn't sing or dance or make jokes or anything?
Nope, just he's in the tent, sir, refreshing. It's not much of a part.
No.
We had a lot more in A Christmas Carol.
Did Dickens have kids?
10 of them, 7 boys and 3 girls.
Whoa.
It's too bad Dickens didn't write operas. He'd have written a lot of parts for kids.
Gilbert and Sullivan each wrote operas with other people. Gilbert wrote 11 other operas with 7 different composers. And Sullivan wrote 10 other operas with 7 different writers.
None of which had
None of
kids.
which had kids we know.
Well, they did, and it's not fair.
They also wrote lots of other stuff besides operas. Sullivan wrote hundreds of songs and hymns,
Including Onward Christian Soldiers.
as well as oratorios, instrumental music, a symphony, and 1 grand opera.
Besides his 25 operas, Gilbert wrote more than 40 plays without music, as well as short stories and poems.
Which didn't have. Now you've got me doing it.
I didn't say anything.
His poetry was mostly humorous and was published as the Bad Ballads, which was his most famous work other than his operas with Sullivan.
Bab was Gilbert's nickname when he was a kid.
Before they started calling him Schwenk, and his life was ruined.
Despite all those other things they wrote, they're best known for their work together. They worked as a team for 25 years, producing 13 full-length operas and, yes, one one-act.
And the dramatic cantata, The Martyr of Antioch.
Gilbert only arranged the words, so that doesn't count.
Did it have any kids in it?
I don't think so.
Then who cares?
I don't.
Most of their operas are still done today, all over the English-speaking world. But the story of how they wrote those operas is less well-known. But it's still very, very interesting.
And that's what our play's about.
So enjoy the show.
Don't expect to see any kids, though.
So, we're done now? I'm hungry.
welcome to Very Truly Yours, Gilbert and Sullivan. We have the honor to present to you Mr. W.S. Gilbert and Mr. Arthur Sullivan, in their own words, the words of their contemporaries, and, of course, in excerpts from all 14 of their operas. We have begun, appropriately enough, with an invocation from Gilbert and Sullivan's Princess Ida, and it seems only fitting to continue with introductions. Now, no photograph survives of Gilbert and Sullivan together, but in 1879, the two Englishmen sit for a joint interview with the New York Herald, offering perhaps the best surviving description of Gilbert and Sullivan together.
The appearance and manner of the two famous Englishmen greatly belie the published accounts which have found their way across the ocean, and which represented most especially Mr. Gilbert as a man of austere and haughty temperament. On the contrary, two more amiable, modest, simple, good-humored, and vivacious men could not easily be imagined. They fairly brim over with animation, high spirits, and the jolliest kind of bonhomie, and it would appear to the most indifferent observer that they must shed gladness upon any company in which they happen to be. Mr. Gilbert is a fine, well-made, robust man, apparently 45, above the medium stature, with the brightest and rosiest of faces, an auburn mustache, and short mutton-chop whiskers, tipped only slightly with gray, large and clear blue eyes, and a forehead of high, massive, and intellectual cast. His voice has a hearty, deep ring, and his utterance is quick and jerky, as though he were almost tired of keeping up this business of saying funny things, which everybody more or less expects of him.
Mr. Sullivan is quite different. In his appearance, gentle feeling and tender emotion are as strongly expressed as cold, glittering, keen-edged intellect is in that of Mr. Gilbert. He is short, round, and plump, with a very fleshy neck, and as dark as his collaborator is fair, with a face of wonderful mobility and sensitiveness, in which the slightest emotion plays with unmistakable meaning, with eyes which only the German adjective of soulful would fitly describe, and the full, sensuous lips of a man of impassioned nature. With all this, Mr. Sullivan, who keeps a monocle dangling over one eye, while the other twinkles merrily at you, and whose dark whiskers and hair have an ambrosial curl, is also something of a polished man of fashion.
Gilbert and Sullivan first meet a decade earlier on the set of Gilbert's operetta Ages Ago at the Royal Gallery of Illustration. The music for Ages Ago is by Frederick Clay, a great friend of Arthur Sullivan, and it is Clay who first introduces the 27-year-old composer to the 33-year-old writer. Now, both men are already famous. Sullivan for his instrumental music, oratorios in the operetta Cox and Box, and Gilbert for some 14 plays and operas, as well as his nonsense verse, collected and published as the Bab Ballads. As Gilbert recalls in later years, the relationship begins, appropriately enough, with a puzzle, as Gilbert parrots a line from an upcoming play to try it out on Sullivan.
I explained to Sullivan, my friend Fred Clay and I have been discussing a technical point upon which you may be able to throw some light. My contention is that if a musician who is a master of all instruments has a musical theme to express, he can express it as readily upon the simple tetrachord of Mercury, in which, as we all know, there are no diatonic intervals whatever, as upon the more elaborate diapason with the tetrachords and the redundant note, which, as I need not remind a composer of your distinction, embraces in its perfect consonance all the single, double, and inverted chords. Sullivan reflected for a moment and asked me to oblige him by repeating my question. I did so, and he replied that it was a very nice point, and that he would like to think it over before giving me a definite reply. That took place about 20 years ago, and I believe he is still engaged in hammering it out.
Gilbert and Sullivan collaborate for the first time in 1871 on the opera Thespis, written for the Christmas extravaganza at the Gaiety Theater. It scores a modest success, but nonetheless the music is soon lost, though the book and lyrics survive to the present day. Only 2 tunes remain from Thespis. One is a chorus later transplanted into the Pirates of Penzance, while the other is a lovely little ballad which is popular enough to be released as sheet music, the hit single from Thespis, as it were. It tells the mildly cynical story of a love affair gone wrong.
Little maid of Arcady sat on Cousin Robin's knee, thought in face and form and limb, nobody could rival him. He was brave and she was fair, true they made a pretty pair. Happy little maiden she, happy maid of Arcady, happy little maiden she, happy maid of Arcady, happy maid of Arcady. Moments sped as moments will, rapidly enough, until after say a month or 2, Robin did as robins do, weary of his lover's play, jilted her and ran away. Wretched little maiden she, doleful maid of Arcady, doleful maid of Arcady. To her little home she crept, there she sat her down and wept. Maidens wept as maidens will, grew so thin and pale until cozy Richard came to woo. Then again the roses grew. Happy little maiden she, happy maid of Arcady, happy little maiden she, happy maid of Arcady, happy maid of Arcady.
The music for Thespis soon disappears forever, but not interest in the show itself. After the success of the next Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, Trial by Jury, a novice producer contracts with them for a revival of Thespis. Unfortunately, his financing falls through, and for the moment, Gilbert and Sullivan have heard the last of a man destined to loom large in their collaboration, Richard Doyley Cart.
Dear Sullivan, I have heard no more about Thespis. It's astonishing how these capitalists dry up under the magic influence of the words cash down. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
Meanwhile, during the 4 years between Thespis and Trial by Jury, Gilbert and Sullivan continue to collaborate occasionally on non-operatic songs. One of these, Sweethearts, is written in connection with Gilbert's 1874 play of the same name, whose plot it summarizes.
"Oh, take this love, dear love," said he.
He spake with a tearful sigh.
That night he was going across the sea, and this was his last goodbye, and this was his last goodbye. She took the gift with a mocking smile, in the flush of her maiden pride. With hearts in the sky she died a while, then through the flower of sight, the thing of love sighed. Oh, for a year, a week, a day, but alas for the love that loves away. Oh, for a year, a week, a day, but alas for the love that loves away.
the flower he
Love
craved.
craved. Now by the love that I have for thee, my breaking heart is saved. My breaking heart is saved. He kissed it once with a tender sigh, and treasured it near his heart. Though years go by, this flower and I shall never part. Shall never part. Oh, love for him, oh, yesterday, but alas, for love that loves away. Oh, love for him, oh, yesterday, but alas, for the love that loves away. They met again in the after years. Life's sad sorrowful time,
Their heads were heavy with age and tears, and white with the winter rime. He found the flower she'd scorned in play,
at a faithful hearted well. His flower, they say, cast away before its petals fell. Love for him, oh, yesterday, but alas, for the love that loves away.
love for him, oh, yesterday, but alas, alas, for the love that loves away.
The next Gilbert and Sullivan collaboration, Trial by Jury, comes about largely by accident. Gilbert happens to have an already written short libretto which has been returned to him by a producer whose wife has died. When the manager of the Royalty Theater, the soon-to-be famous Richard D'Oyley Carte, asks if he happens to have anything which could be used as a curtain raiser for Offenbach's La Paracole, Gilbert suggests Trial by Jury. It is Carte who recommends Sullivan as the composer. And as Sullivan recalls in later years, it's not long before Gilbert finds himself at the composer's apartment, reading his libretto aloud.
He read it through, as it seemed to me, in a perturbed sort of way, with a gradual crescendo of indignation, in the manner of a man considerably disappointed with what he had written. As soon as he had come to the last word, he closed up the manuscript violently, apparently unconscious of the fact that he had achieved his purpose so far as I was concerned, inasmuch as I was screaming with laughter the whole time. The music was written and the rehearsals completed within the space of 3 weeks' time.
Some of the sprightliest music in Trial by Jury is for Edwin, the defendant in a breach of promise of marriage case. Now, Edwin's defense essentially is that he's met another lady whom he likes better, though he is willing to marry both ladies if that can be arranged. Sullivan perhaps finds this rapscallion sympathetic, because not long before he himself has also been engaged to a young lady named Rachel Scott Russell.
Darling Arthur, ah, me. When I think of those days when cooing and purring was enough for us, till we tried the utmost. And that is why I fancy marriage spoils love. When you can drink brandy, water tastes sickly afterwards. Your fond dove, Rachel.
Simultaneously, however, Sullivan has also been in correspondence with Rachel's sister, Louise.
Dearest Arthur, we come to you so pure and chaste. You have your love and your little woman, and you have taken as your right the only thing I have to give. Yours, Louise.
Under the circumstances, it's not long before Sullivan hears from the young lady's mother.
Dear sir, it has come upon me with a shock to learn that you could not be content on merely the terms of intimate friendship in this family. If you cannot bring yourself to be satisfied with that which hitherto subsisted, abstain from coming here until you can do so, and cease all correspondence. I grieve that I reposed in you a confidence to which you were not equal. I did it in absolute good faith. Sincerely, Henriette Scott Russell.
Oh, gentlemen, listen, I pray, though I own that my heart has been ranging. Of nature the laws I obey, for nature is constantly changing. The moon in her phases has found the time in the wind and the weather. The months of succession come around and you don't find 2 Mondays together. Oh, consider the moral, I pray, nor bring a young fellow to sorrow who loves this young lady today and loves that young lady tomorrow. You cannot eat breakfast all day, nor is it the act of a sinner, when breakfast is taken away, to turn his attention to dinner. And it's not in the range of belief to look upon him as a glutton, who when he is tired of beef determines to tackle the mutton. Ah, but this I am willing to say, if it will appease her sorrow, I'll marry this lady today and I'll marry the other tomorrow. But this he is willing to say, if it will appease her sorrow, I'll marry this lady today and marry the other tomorrow.
Trial by Jury is a hit, and Richard Doyley Carts seizes his opportunity. Launching the Comedy Opera Company, he commissions Gilbert and Sullivan to write a new opera, which turns out to be The Sorcerer. He hires the Opera Comique, a run-down theater in an unfashionable neighborhood, and gives Gilbert and Sullivan complete creative control. Gilbert will write, direct, choreograph, and often design scenery and/or costumes as well. As music director, conductor, and composer, Sullivan will have complete control over singers and orchestra. Now, either man can veto the other's work, but nobody else has any say in artistic matters, not even Cart. Gilbert and Sullivan plan an entirely new approach to musical theater and decide not to hire any established stars for box office appeal. In fact, it soon becomes known that they are considering George Grossmith for the title role in The Sorcerer. Grossmith has never acted before and is best known as a piano entertainer at the YMCA. Cart's financial backers immediately fire off a telegram.
Whatever you do, don't engage Grossmith.
But artistic decisions are entirely in the hands of Gilbert and Sullivan, as Grossmith recalls in his memoirs.
I called upon Arthur Sullivan at his flat in Victoria Gardens. He played a D on the piano and asked me to sing it as loudly as I could. I did so, and he exclaimed, "Wonderful!" He then sang through the song, "My Name is John Wellington Wells," and asked me, "You can do that?" I replied, "Yes, I think I can do that." And he responded, "If you can do that, you can do the rest." And so the matter was arranged. I said to Gilbert, "For the part of a magician, I should have thought you required a fine man with a fine voice." Gilbert replied, "That's exactly what we don't want." My name is John Wellington Wells. I'm a dealer in magic and spells, in blessings and curses and ever-full purses and prophecies, witches and knells. If you want a proud foe to make tracks, if you melt through a jungle in wax, you've got to look in on the resident gin number 70 Simmery Axe. We've a first-rate assortment of magic, and for greasing a posthumous shade, with effects that are comic or tragic, there's no cheaper house in the trade. The filter we quantities of it, and for knowledge if anyone burns, we're keeping a very small profit to profit who brings us unbounded returns. For he can prophesy with a wink of his eye, peep at security, interview futurity, sum up your history, clear up a mystery, human proclivity, for a nativity, for a nativity. He has answers oracular, bogey spectacular, touched by tragical, mute is so magical, facts astronomical, solemn or comical, and if you want it, he makes a reduction on taking the quantity. Oh, if anyone anything lacks, they'll find it already in stacks, if they'll only look in on the resident gin number 70 Simmery Axe. He can raise you hosts of ghosts, and that without reflectors, and creepy things with wings, and gaunt and grisly spectres. He can fill your crowds with shrouds, and horrify you vastly. He can rack your brain with chains, and gibberings grim and ghastly. Then if you plan it, he changes organicity with an urbanity, full of satirity, vexes humanity with an inanity, fatal to vanity, driving your foes to the verge of insanity. Barring tautology, demonology, electric biology, mystic physiology, spirit philology, high-class astrology, such as this knowledge isn't a man to require an apology. Oh! My name is John Wellington Wells. I'm a dealer in magic and spells, in blessings and curses and ever-filled purses and prophecies, witches and knells. And if anyone anything lacks, they'll find it already in stacks, if they'll only look in on the resident gin number 70 Simmery Axe.
The Sorcerer is a tremendous success, with the biggest hit being scored by George Grossmith as John Wellington Wells. Grossmith will go on to create the lead baritone roles in the next 8 Gilbert and Sullivan operas and become one of the era's best-loved entertainers. Around this time, Sullivan receives an intriguing proposal for a collaboration.
Dear Sir, I am the writer of a little book for children, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which has proved so unexpectedly popular that the idea of dramatizing it has been several times started. If that is ever done, I shall want it done in the best possible way, sparing no expense, and one feature I should want would be good music. So I thought, knowing your charming compositions, it would be well to get 2 or 3 of the songs in it set by you, to be kept for the occasion, if that should arrive, of its being dramatized. If that idea were finally abandoned, we might then arrange for publishing them with music. Faithfully yours, C.L. Dodgson, Lewis Carroll.
But Sullivan is not interested in so uncertain a proposal. Besides, he's already hard at work on his next opera with Gilbert. However, the new HMS Pinafore is more politically sensitive than the Sorcerer. In particular, the Grossmith part is widely believed to be modeled on W.H. Smith, the humbly born millionaire bookseller recently appointed First Lord of the Admiralty.
I send you herewith a sketch of the proposed opera. I hope and think that you will like it. I called on you 2 days ago, not knowing that you had gone abroad, to consult you about it before drawing it up in full. I have very little doubt whatever that you will be pleased with it. I should like to have talked it over with you, as there is a good deal of fun in it, which I haven't set down on paper. Among other things, a song, a kind of judge's song, for the First Lord, tracing his career as office boy in cotton broker's office, clerk, traveller, junior partner, and First Lord of Britain's Navy. I think a splendid song can be made of this. Of course, there will be no personality in this. The fact that a First Lord of the Opera is a radical of the most pronounced type will do away with any suspicion that W.H. Smith is intended. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
When I was a lad, I served a term as office boy to an attorney's firm. I cleaned the windows and I swept the floor, and I polished up the handle of the big front door. He polished up the handle of the big front door. I polished up the handle so carefully that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy. He polished up the handle so carefully that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy. As office boy, I made such a mark that they gave me the post of a junior clerk. I served the writs with a smile so bland, and I copied all the letters in a big round hand. He copied all the letters in a big round hand. I copied all the letters in a hand so free that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy. He copied all the letters in a hand so free that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy. In serving writs, I made such a name that an article clerk I soon became. I wore clean collars and a brand new suit for the pass examination at the Institute. That pass examination did so well for me that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy. That pass examination did so well for me that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy. Of legal knowledge I acquired such a grip that they took me into the partnership. And the junior partnership I win was the only ship that I ever had seen. But that kind of ship so suited me that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy. But that kind of ship so suited me that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy. I grew so rich that I was sent by a pocket borough into Parliament. I always voted at my party's call. I never thought of thinking for myself at all. He never thought of thinking for myself at all. I thought so little, they rewarded me by making me the ruler of the Queen's Navy. He thought so little, they rewarded me by making me the ruler of the Queen's Navy. Now, landsmen or whomever you may be, if you want to rise to the top of the tree, if your soul is unfettered to an office stool, be careful to be guided by this golden rule. Be careful to be guided by this golden rule. Stick close to your desk. Never gonna see. And you all be the rules of the Queen's Navy. Stick close to your desk and never gonna see. And you all be the rules of the Queen's Navy.
Needless to say, W.H. Smith soon becomes known as Pinafore Smith. The early reviews for HMS Pinafore are generally favorable, but there are contrasting opinions heard. For example, the London Daily Telegraph.
A frothy production destined soon to subside into nothingness.
Among others, Mr. Lewis Carroll dislikes HMS Pinafore, in particular for its use of gratuitously offensive language, specifically the word dammy.
How Mr. Gilbert could have stooped to write, or Mr. Arthur Sullivan could have prostituted his noble art to set to music such vile trash, it passes my skill to understand.
But HMS Pinafore becomes an international sensation, and soon its catchphrases such as, "What, never?" Well, hardly ever, are on everybody's lips from London to New York and beyond. No fewer than 8 different productions of HMS Pinafore play simultaneously on Broadway, and dozens more elsewhere in America. Owing to the absence of an international copyright, however, Gilbert and Sullivan received not a penny for any of these productions. In an effort to profit at least a little from their own popularity in America, Gilbert and Sullivan bring their own authentic Pinafore to New York, where Gilbert is interviewed by the New York Herald.
Are you surprised at the success of Pinafore in America?
It is rather hard, when one has done for years serious work, or work at least aiming to be so, to find after all that a frothy trifle like this should here so far exceed in its success the work which one has held in far more serious estimation. For we really had no idea that it would be such an extraordinary success, you know.
How are your words and music so closely linked?
We have now been working together harmoniously for the last 7 years, and have learned to understand each other so thoroughly that even the faintest suggestion of the one meets with a ready and sympathetic response from the other. In all this period of active cooperation, it has never once occurred that we have disagreed as to the way in which an idea should be carried out, be it either poetically or musically.
Did you expect these familiar quotations from Pinafore to become the popular catchwords which they are now?
Never.
What, never?
Well, very seldom.
In an effort to prevent unauthorized American productions of their next opera, The Pirates of Penzance, Gilbert and Sullivan decided to premiere it in New York. It is their most ambitious work to date, and includes an unusual feature, a male chorus of policemen who appear only in the second act.
Dear Sullivan, by the way, I've made great use of the tarantara business in Act 2. The police always sing tarantara when they desire to work their courage to the sticking point. They are naturally timid, but through the agency of this talisman, they are enabled to acquit themselves well. When concealed in Act 2 and the robbers approach, their courage begins to fail them. But a recourse to tarantara pianissimo has the desired effect. I mention this that you may bear it in mind in setting the general's tarantara song. I mean that it may be treated as an important feature and not as a mere incidental effect. I need not say that. This is merely suggestion. If you don't like it, it shan't be done. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
When the foeman bears a steel,
Tarantara, tarantara.
we uncomfortable feel.
Tarantara.
And we find the wisest thing
Tarantara, tarantara.
is to slap our chests and sing
Tarantara.
For when threatened with a mute
Tarantara, tarantara.
and your heart is in your boots,
Tarantara.
there is nothing brings it round like the trumpet's martial sound, like the trumpet's martial sound.
Tarantara, 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 tarantara,
The Pirates of Penzance is an immediate hit with New York audiences and critics alike, except for one aspect of the show which is deemed less than satisfactory. The New York Times.
The essential part of The Young Pirate Apprentice received inadequate attention from the tenor. His makeup resulted in his appearing, in the first act, to be of advanced age. He was not apparently acquainted with his lines, and his singing was weak and tame.
The New York Sun.
Mr. Talbot, the tenor, had unfortunately apparently not thought it necessary to commit his lines to memory and made nonsense of much of his role.
The New York World.
Mr. Hugh Talbot may be taken as a fair illustration of George Eliot's statement that when nature made a tenor, she spoiled a man. Mr. Talbot sang some of the airs allotted to a tenor admirably, but he was utterly innocent of any appreciation whatever of the humor of the situations, and shamefully ignorant of his lines.
The New York Mirror.
The gentleman has a weak, uncertain voice of nasal quality and limited volume, and labored under the disadvantage of not knowing his lines.
The New York Tribune.
Mr. Talbert's version of the text is considerably different than Mr. Gilbert's. We shall suspend criticism of his performance until he knows his lines.
The New York Herald.
Groped after his cue in the most vague manner.
The Hour.
The actors and the singers acquitted themselves with credit, with the exception of the tenor, who did inexcusable mischief.
The New York Mirror.
Loathsome and disgusting.
Dearest Mum, the tenor is an idiot, vain and empty-headed. He very nearly upset the piece on the first night, as he didn't know his words and forgot his music. We shall, I think, have to get rid of him. Very truly yours, Arthur Sullivan.
The attempt to establish an American copyright for the opera fails. According to Justice Diver of New York State,
copyright or no copyright, commercial honesty or commercial buccaneering, no Englishman possesses any rights which a true-born American is bound to respect.
this legal opinion perhaps influences Sullivan's feelings about New York, expressed in a letter home to his mother.
Dearest Mum, this is to wish you a happy New Year, and my most heartfelt wish is that next year I may spend it with you. I am sick of this place and its people. New York is like a provincial English town, only ill-bred, rough, and swaggering. I am bitterly disappointed in everything around me. The people in the streets and shops are insolent and ill-mannered, and there is no real lady or gentleman to be found. I, of course, accept them if they are pleasant in any way, but for the rest, I don't care a straw. Don't show this letter to anyone, as it might get around, and I shall probably read in the newspapers in the morning the large heading, Arthur Sullivan's Opinion of Americans. 8 weeks tomorrow since I left England, and I wish myself back already. Very truly yours, Arthur Sullivan.
When Sullivan finally does make it back to England, he has a new opera to write, Patience, and other interests as well. Soon after Patience is launched to the usual rapturous reception, its composer embarks upon a Mediterranean cruise.
Dearest Mum, there is one rather pretty girl on board. She asked me yesterday if I had heard Patience. I said yes, I had. Then she began to quote it and rave about it. I let her run on for some time, then told her that she would be glad to know that I had written the music. Tableau.
Dearest Mum receives no further details of the evening.
Prithee, pretty maiden, prithee tell me true. Hey, but I'm doleful, willow, willow, waly. Have you e'er a lover a-dangling after you? Hey, willow, waly, oh, I would fain discover if you have a lover. Hey, willow, waly, oh.
Gentle sir, my heart is frolicsome and free. Hey, but he's doleful, willow, willow.
pretty maiden, will you marry me? Hey, but I'm hopeful, willow, willow, waly. I may say at once, I'm a man of property. Hey, willow, waly, oh. Money, I despise it, many people prize it. Hey, willow, waly, oh.
Gentle Sir, to marry I design. Hey, buddies hopeful, willow, willow, willy. As yet I do not know you, and so I must decline. Hey, willow, willy, oh. To other maidens go you, as yet I do not know you. Hey,
willow, willy, oh.
Soon after its opening, Patience is transferred to the new Savoy Theater, built by Cart especially for Gilbert and Sullivan. The Savoy, the first theater in London to be lit entirely by electricity, will be the site of all future Gilbert and Sullivan premieres. Not long afterward, Sullivan is knighted, almost 25 years before Gilbert. This is primarily because many people mistakenly believe Gilbert to be a radical, failing to distinguish between him and his characters. For instance, the new opera, Iolanthe, includes an Act 2 solo for Lord Mount Ararat, which is a ringing affirmation of the utter uselessness of the House of Peers. In 1909, during a campaign against the veto power of the peers, their opponents appealed to Gilbert for permission to use the song as a campaign hymn.
Gentlemen, I cannot permit the verses from Iolanthe to be used for electioneering purposes. They do not at all express my own view. They are supposed to be the views of the wrong-headed donkey who sings them. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
The campaign against the peers is successful, however. Apparently, the voters agree more with Gilbert's characters than they do with Gilbert himself.
Britain really ruled the waves in good Queen Bess's time. The House of Peers made no pretense to intellectual eminence or scholarship sublime. Yet Britain won her proudest days in good Queen Bess's glorious days. Yet Britain won her proudest days in good Queen Bess's glorious days.
Yes, Britain won her proudest days in good Queen Bess's glorious days.
When Wellington thrashed Bonaparte, as every child can tell, the House of Peers throughout the war did nothing in particular, and did it very well. Yet Britain set the world ablaze in good King George's glorious days. Yet Britain set the world ablaze in good King George's glorious days.
Yes, Britain set the world ablaze in good King George's glorious days.
And while the House of Peers withholds its legislative hand, and noble statesmen do not itch to interfere in matters which they do not understand, as bright will shine Great Britain's rays as in King George's glorious days. As bright will shine Great Britain's rays
as in King George's glorious days.
As bright will shine Great Britain's rays,
as in King George's glorious days.
In 1907, Gilbert looks back on his partnership with Sullivan in a famous speech at the Old Players Club.
When Sullivan and I began to collaborate, English comic opera had practically ceased to exist. Such musical entertainments as there were French adaptations, generally frankly improper or bowdlerized out of intelligibility. Whereas the ladies' dresses suggested that the management had gone on the principle of doing a little and doing it well. We set out to prove that these elements were not essential to the success of humorous opera. We resolved that our plots, however ridiculous, should be coherent, that our dialogue should be void of offense, and that on artistic principles no man should play a woman's part, and no woman a man's. Finally, we agreed that no lady of the company should be required to wear a dress that she would not wear with absolute propriety at a private ball. And I believe I may say that we proved our case.
Prior to the theatrical revolution led by Gilbert and Sullivan, it has actually not been unusual for women to play male roles, primarily because of the opportunities it offers for them to appear in tights. For example, in Gilbert's 1870 play, The Princess, not only is the title character played by a woman, so also is her lover the prince, his 2 gentlemen-in-waiting, and her 3 hulking brothers. When Gilbert and Sullivan adapt the play in 1884 as Princess Ida, all the male roles are played by men. So, in a sense, are some of the female roles, as the prince and his friends disguise themselves to gain entrance to a women's university.
I am a maiden cold and stately, heartless-eyed with a face divine. What do I want with a heart innately? Every heart I meet is mine. Every heart I meet is mine, is mine. Haughty, humble, coy, free, little care I what may be, so that a maid is fair to see. Every maid is the maid for me.
I am a maiden frank and simple, brimming with joy, hearts green. Merriment lurks in every dimple, nobody breaks more hearts than I. Nobody breaks no heart more hearts than I.
Haughty, humble, coy or free, little care I what they may be, so that a maid is there to see. Every maid is the maid for me.
I am a maiden coyly blushing, timid am I as a startled hind. Every suitor sets me blushing, every suitor sets me blushing. I am the maid that wins mankind.
Haughty, humble, coy or free, little care I what maid may be, so that a maid is fair to see. Every maid is a maid for me. Haughty, humble, coy or free, little care I what maid may be, so that a maid is fair to see. Every maid is a maid for me.
Not long after Princess Ida opens, Sullivan returns to the United States to attend to family business in California. First, however, his secretary, Smythe, must straighten out some difficulty with Sullivan's insurance company.
Sirs, I am somewhat astonished that you cannot find Los Angeles, California, which is one of the most important places in the United States. I have not the time to spare to look up the latitude and longitude of Los Angeles, but it is near San Francisco, about 200 miles distant. Sincerely, Walter Smythe.
The team's next opera, The Mikado, is already a worldwide sensation. But Sullivan discovers that fame is fleeting when, in a small western town, he's challenged to a fist fight. As matters develop, he has been mistaken for the heavyweight champion of the world, John L. Sullivan. Once the confusion has been straightened out, the would-be brawler is happy to buy a drink for the composer of Pinafore. Meanwhile, back in England, Gilbert is already hard at work on the team's next opera, the grim melodrama satire Ruddigore.
Dear Sullivan, I enclose 4 numbers of the new piece. I like them all, except Brandrum's ballad, which might be more effective in longer lines and sung as a kind of chant, to which its present form is, of course, unsuited. It ought to be grim and dramatic, I think, and ought to end more effectively than it does in its present form. However, I send it to you for what it is worth. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
Sullivan agrees, and the ballad is reworked into suitably grim and dramatic form as the story of Sir Rupert Murgatroyd.
Sir Rupert Murgatroyd his leisure and his riches he ruthlessly employed at persecuting witches. With fear he'd make them quake, he'd duck them in his lake, he'd break their bones with sticks and stones and burn them at the stake.
This was he much enjoyed. He did Rupert Murgatroyd, no sense of shame or pity came to Rupert Murgatroyd.
Once on the village green, a palsied hag he roasted, and what the place I ween shook his composure boasted, or as the torch of grim seized on each withered limb, the writhing dame in fire and flame yelled forth his curse on him. Each lord of Bragador, despite his best endeavor, shall do one crime or more once every day forever. His doom he can't defy, however he may try, for should he stay his hand that day, in torture he will die. The prophecy came true, each heir who held the title had every day to do a crime of import vital, until with guilt or pride I'll sin no more, he cried. And on that day he said that day in agony.
and thus employed, as thy destroyed, and so shall thy love be
By Gilbert and Sullivan standards, Ruddigore is something of a failure, running for only 9 months. However, as Gilbert points out in later years, one man's failure may be another man's success.
Sir Arthur Sullivan and I are credited with one failure, Ruddigore, to which all I can say is that it put £7,000 in my pocket, and I could do with a few more such failures. The utmost that I can wish to my dramatic rivals is that they should all have 5 such failures, and on the proceeds retire from the stage.
The biggest trouble with Ruddigore, it is generally agreed, is that it happens to follow The Mikado, the most popular comic opera ever written. The international success of The Mikado eclipses even that of HMS Pinafore, and its score overflows with gems which outshine even the brightest of Ruddigore's. Perhaps the most impressive number in The Mikado, both musically and lyrically, is an Act 1 trio in which Koko, Pooh-Bah, and Pish-Tush attempt to decide which of them will volunteer to be beheaded. As is often the case, however, the germ of the musical idea of the song comes not from Sullivan, but from Gilbert, in this case from this economical urge to save on paper.
Dearest, I send a trio for Koko, Pooh-Bah, and Pish-Tush. I think it might be quaint and effective. I have put the 3 verses side by side for convenience sake, but of course they would be sung separately. I fancy the meter admits of each verse being set differently, but I may be wrong in this. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
Sullivan agrees with the idea of each verse having a separate tune, but apparently seeing all 3 verses side by side sparks an idea of his own.
I am so proud if I allowed my family pride to be my guide. I'd volunteer to quit this sphere instead of you in a minute or 2. But family pride must be denied and set aside and mortified and mortified.
My brain it teems with endless schemes, both good and new, for titty-poo, for titty-poo. But if I flit, the benefit that I diffuse, the town would lose. Now every man to aid his clan should plot and plan as best he can.
I heard one day a gentleman say that criminals who are cut in two and hardly veil the fatal steel, and so are plain and snug without much pain. If this is true, jolly for you, how it's good to things to do.
My
brain teems with endless schemes, both good and new, for titty-poo, for titty-poo. But if I flit, the benefit that I diffuse, the town would lose. Now every man to aid his clan should plot and plan as best he can. And so, although I'm ready to go, yet recollect what disrespected I neglect to thus effect the same direct. So I object.
And so, although I wish to go and greatly pine to brightly shine and take the line of a hero fine with grief condign, I must decline.
Then go and show old friend and foe how much you dare. I'm quite aware of your affair, but I declare I take this I don't much care.
So I object, 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 so I object.
To sit in solemn silence in a dull, dark dock, in the pestilential prison with the lifelong lock, awaiting the sensation of a short, sharp shock from a chippy chopper on a big black block. To sit in solemn silence in a dull, dark dock, in a pestilential prison with the lifelong lock, awaiting the sensation of a short, sharp shock from a chippy chopper on a big black block. A dull, dark dock, a lifelong lock, a short, sharp shock, a big black block, to sit in solemn silence in a pestilential prison and awaiting the sensation from a chippy chopper on a big black block.
Gilbert and Sullivan follow Ruddigore with the most distinctive of their works, The Yeoman of the Guard. Not only is it the most serious of their operas, but it dispenses with the usual upbeat opening chorus. Instead, the curtain rises on mezzo-soprano Jessie Bond alone on stage, singing a sad song of love. Perhaps because of the opera's many risky innovations, Gilbert is even more nervous than usual on opening night, as Bond recalls in her memoirs.
Gilbert was always dreadfully overwrought on these occasions, but this time he was almost beside himself with nervousness and excitement. I'm afraid he made himself a perfect nuisance behind the scenes, and did his best, poor fellow, to upset us all. He kept fussing about. "Oh, Jessie, are you sure you're all right? Jessie this, Jessie that," until I was almost as demented as he was. At last I turned on him savagely. "For heaven's sake, Mr. Gilbert, go away and leave me alone, or I shan't be able to sing a note." He gave me a final frenzied hug and vanished.
When maiden of she sits and sighs, she wanders to and fro. Unbidden teardrops fill her eyes, and to all questions she replies with a sad hey-ho. 'Tis but a little word, hey-ho, so soft 'tis scarcely heard, hey-ho, an idle breath, yet life and death may hang upon a maid's hey-ho. An idle breath, yet life and death may hang upon a maid's hey-ho. When maiden of she mopes apart as a mope's on a tree, although she keenly feels the smart, she cannot tell what ails her heart with its sad ah me. 'Tis but a foolish sigh, eloquence lies hidden in a maid's army. Yet all the sense of eloquence lies hidden in a maid's army. Yet all the sense of eloquence lies hidden in a maid's army.
Perhaps the most memorable character in the Yeoman of the Guard is the tragic jester Jack Point, whose fate is foreshadowed in his opening song. The merry man and his maid give Sullivan unprecedented musical difficulty, however, as Gilbert recalls in later years.
The verse always preceded the music. Very rarely Sullivan would say of some song, "My dear fellow, I can't make anything of this," and then I would rewrite it entirely, never tinker at it. But of course, I didn't invent all the rhythms in the operas. Often a rhythm would be suggested by some old tune or other running in my head, and I would fit my words to it more or less exactly. When Sullivan knew I had done so, he would say, "Don't tell me what the tune is, or I shan't be able to get it out of my head." But once, I remember, I did tell him. There is a duet in the Yeoman of the Guard that was suggested to me by an old chanty I used to hear the sailors on my yacht singing in the evenings, beginning, "Come and I will sing to you, what will you sing to me? I will sing you 1-0, what is your 1-0?" and so on. Well, Sullivan found the utmost difficulty in setting it. He tried hard for a fortnight, but in vain. I offered to recast it in another mould, but he expressed himself so delighted with it in its then form that he determined to work it out to a satisfactory issue. At last he said to me, "If anything prompted you in this case, hum it to me. It may help me." Only a rash man ever asks me to hum, but the situation was desperate, and I did my best to convey to him the air of the shanty. Before I hummed a dozen bars, he exclaimed, "That will do, I've got it," and in an hour he produced the charming air as it appears in the opera. I have sometimes thought that he exclaimed, "That will do, I've got it," because my humming was more than he could bear.
Dear Gilbert, it was the only time in your life when you were responsible for the music as well as the words. I wish you would make a habit of doing half the music as well. Very truly yours, Arthur Sullivan.
I have a song to sing. Oh,
Sing me a song,
this song to the moon by a lovelorn moon who fled for the mocking throng. Oh, it's the song of a merry man moping on, whose soul was sad, whose glance was glum, who sipped no sup and who craved no crumb, as he sighed for the love of a lady. Lady, lady, misery me, lack-a-day-dee, he sipped no sup and he craved no crumb, as he sighed for the love of a lady.
I have a song to sing. Oh,
what is your song? Oh,
it is sung with the ring of the songs made sing, who love with the love life long. Oh, it's the song of the merry maid, really proud, who loved I Lord and who laughed I loud at the moment
day bravely born, who turned up his noble nose with scorn at the humble merry maid, really proud, who loved our Lord, who laughed aloud, the moan of a merry man, Moby Mom, whose soul was sad and whose glance was calm, who sipped no sop and who craved no crumb, as he sighed for the love of a lady. Lady, lady, misery me like a lady. He sipped no sop and he craved no crumb, as he sighed for the love of a lady.
I have a song to sing. Oh.
Sing me your song.
His song with a sigh and a tear in the eye, for it tells of a right and wrong. Oh, it's the song of the merry maid once so gay, who turned on her heel and tripped away. The maid of Pumpkin bravely back, who turned up his noble nose with scorn. The humble heart that he did not prize, so she begged on her knees with downcast eyes for the love of the merry man, Moby Mum, whose soul was sad and his glance was glum, who sent no psalm and who grieved no crumb, as he sighed for the love of a
The next opera, The Gondoliers, is as buoyant and cheerful as the Yeoman of the Guard had been tender and bittersweet. In The Gondoliers, even the arguments are amusing, particularly one in which Sullivan employs a musical device which he claims to have invented, the idea of establishing separate tunes and then combining them.
You get the germ of it in The Sorcerer, and it is afterwards worked in a greater degree in The Pirates, the policeman's chorus, with the counter theme for The Sopranos. In The Mikado, there is, among others, the trio for the three men in the first act, with all three different themes going at the same time. The most ingenious bit of work, certainly the most difficult, is the quartet in The Gondoliers, in a contemplative fashion.
As usual, however, Gilbert has more than a little to do with it.
Dear Sullivan, I have altered the in a contemplative fashion as you suggested. The only question is whether the last two verses, which the girls sing at each other and in which the two men have nothing to do, would be better in the original flowing meter, as lending itself better to the volubility of two angry girls. I don't care to pin myself which it is, but I thought you might find the original dactylic meter better for that purpose. As you like. Here it is in both forms. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert. P.S. It had just occurred to me that a good effect might be produced by continuing the "let us grasp the situation" pianissimo through the second half of the number.
In a contemplative fashion, and a tranquil frame of mind, free from every kind of passion, some solution let us find. Let us grasp the situation, solve the complicated lot, quite calm deliberation disentangles every knot. I know Don Giuseppe wedding, that's of course a slice of luck. He's round underheaded, distinctly he's a duck. I am Victor Torrey, more compelling, that is clear. He's particularly stupid, still distinctly he's a dear.
To
Janetta, I was mated, I can prove it in a trice. Though her charms are overrated, still I own she's rather nice.
I to Tessa, Billy, all at once a victim fell. She is wanting all the silly, still she answers pretty well. She's a silly, still she answers pretty well.
Now when we were pretty babies, someone married us, that's clear.
And if I can catch her, I'll pitch her and scratch her and send her away with a flea of her
Marriage to receive a can't refuse.
If I ever take her as warrant, I'll make her to shake her aristocrat. If she marries, you'll lose the veil and he will have to part. If I have to do it, don't warrant she'll do it. Don't teach her to marry the man of my heart. If she married Mason Marcus, you're a spinster. No matter the matter, if I can get at her, I doubt if my mother will know her. If I have to do that,
Quiet, calm deliberation disentangles every knot.
Gilbert is a great advocate of dance in the musical theater, not as an interpolated specialty, as in the previous tradition, but as an integrated part of the story, reflecting character and situation. He is also closely attuned to the capabilities of his performers, as he demonstrates in an Act 2 song in The Gondoliers, in which the Duke and Duchess of Plaza Toro offer etiquette advice to two humbly born gondoliers, who happen to be simultaneously engaged to the Duke's daughter Casilda.
Dear S, I very much want to rewrite Now I'm About to Kiss Your Hand, making it more musically rhythmical and ending with a minuet. Wyatt and Barrington are both such excellent dancers that it seems a pity to miss so good a chance of utilizing them. What do you think? Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
I am a courtier grave and serious, who is about to kiss your hand. Try to combine a pose imperious with a demeanor nobly blonde.
Let us combine a pose imperious with a demeanor nobly bland.
That's if anything too unbending, too aggressively stiff and grand. Now to the other extreme you're tending, don't be so deucedly condescending.
Now to the other extreme you're testing, don't be so dreadfully condescending.
Oh, hard to please some noblemen seem, at first if anything too unbending, or we go to the other extreme, too confoundedly condescending.
Now Agavat performs sedately, offer your hand with conscious pride. Take an attitude not too stately, still sufficiently dignified.
Now for an attitude not too stately, still sufficiently dignified.
Oncely, twicely, twicely, bow impressively ere you glide. Capital boat, you've caught it nicely. That is the style of thing, precisely.
Capital both, you've caught it nicely. That is the style of thing, precisely.
Oh, sweet to earn a nobleman's praise. Capital both, we caught it nicely. Supposing he's right in what he says, this is the style of thing precisely.
That is the style of thing precisely.
This is the style of thing, the style of thing precisely.
Gondoliers is a hit second only to The Mikado, and in letters written immediately after opening night, Gilbert and Sullivan are only too happy to share the credit.
Dear Sullivan, I must thank you for the magnificent work you have put into the new piece. It gives one the chance of shining right through the 20th century with a reflected light. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
Dear Gilbert, don't talk of reflected light. In such a perfect book as The Gondoliers, you shine with an individual brilliancy which no other writer can hope to attain. If any thanks are due anywhere, they should be from me to you for the patience, willingness, and unfailing good nature with which you have received my suggestions, and your readiness to help me by according to them. Very truly yours, Arthur Sullivan.
All too soon, however, a quarrel between Gilbert and Cart endangers the collaboration. The issues involved are serious ones, involving the finances of the triple partnership, and Gilbert's belief that Cart is overbilling his partners for expenses at the Savoy, which Cart owns and leases to the partnership. But to the general public, excluded from the actual issues at stake, it seems as if the operatic geniuses are at odds over a carpet.
Dear Sullivan, I have had a difficulty with Cart. I was appalled to learn from him that the preliminary expenses of the gondoliers amounted to the stupendous sum of £4,500. This seemed so utterly unaccountable that I asked to see the details, and last night I received a resume of them. This includes such trifles as £75 for Miss Moore's second dress, £50 for her first dress, £450 for the wages of the carpenters during the time they were engaged on the scenery, and so forth. But the most surprising item was £500 for the new carpets for the front of the house. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
Gilbert arranges to meet with Cart, but the meeting is not a success. Trying to make the peace later, Cart's wife and partner Helen writes to Gilbert, offering her version of the meeting.
Dear Mr. Gilbert, I know, of course, that both of you believe absolutely in what you say you said, but you must remember that you were very excited indeed on that occasion. All I was able to say to myself was, I'm sure you are not thinking about what you are saying, Mr. Gilbert. All you said was in a very violent and insulting way, although no one had said or done anything to provoke it. Further conversation then ensued, and you asked Mr. Cart very heatedly what he did for the share he got, and he said he must decline to discuss that. He asked if you were dissatisfied with the existing state of things and wished to break it off. You said you were, and he then said you'd better go and see Sir Arthur Sullivan and talk to him. You then left the room with the remark that it was foolish of Mr. Cart to kick away the ladder by which he had risen. Yours truly, Helen Lenore Cart.
As the quarrel between Gilbert and Cart intensifies, Sullivan is reluctantly forced to take sides, and sides with Cart. Gilbert is incensed. From the Diary of Arthur Sullivan.
Felt ill all day. Received letter from Gilbert breaking off finally our collaboration. Nothing would induce me to write again with him. How I have stood him for so long, I can't understand.
Cart withholds Gilbert's share of the gondolier's proceeds, pending resolution of the dispute, and Gilbert immediately sues Cart. Sullivan testifies in Cart's behalf. Gilbert is stunned.
Dear Sullivan, I have been treated with inexplicable unfairness by an old and valued friend with whom I have been en rapport for many years, and with whose distinguished name I have had the good fortune to find my own indissolubly linked wherever the English language is spoken. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
The court finds in Gilbert's favor, and the librettist immediately makes conciliatory overtures to Sullivan. Even after Gilbert and Cart have resolved their differences, however, the composer remains hesitant.
Dear Gilbert, if there is to be a reconciliation, let it be a thorough one, with confidence restored all around, not merely a patched-up truce. Don't think me exaggerating when I tell you that I am physically and mentally ill over this wretched business. I have not yet got over the shock of seeing our names coupled not in brilliant collaboration over a work destined for worldwide celebration, but in hostile antagonism over a few miserable pounds. Very truly yours, Arthur Sullivan.
Dear Sullivan, this is the present state of my mind as regards our relations towards each other, and if you can suggest any reasonable means whereby this cloud can be removed, it will give me infinite pleasure to adopt it. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
Dear Gilbert, let us meet and shake hands. We can dispel the clouds hanging over us by setting up a counter-irritant in the form of a cloud of smoke. Very truly yours, Arthur Sullivan.
From the Diary of Arthur Sullivan, October 12, 1891.
Gilbert came by appointment at 12, stayed until 2, full reconciliation, and shook hands.
And soon the Victorian public is pleasantly surprised to hear that not only are Mr. Gilbert and Mr. Sullivan speaking to one another again, but they're at work on a new opera. Utopia Limited opens at the Savoy in October of 1893 to a rapturous reception ending with tumultuous applause when, during the curtain calls, Gilbert and Sullivan enter from opposite sides of the stage and, after a dramatic pause, walk to center stage and shake hands warmly. Set on a South Pacific island, the new opera spoofs England's cultural influence over what today would be called the Third World. One of its most popular songs introduces the king's 2 young daughters, who, after a careful upbringing by a strict English governess, are now on display to the utopian populace as shining examples of perfect English girlhood.
be.
Utopia Limited is popular with audiences, but as the most lavish of all the Gilbert and Sullivan productions, costing 3 times as much as Patience, for example, it proves to be financially unviable and must be withdrawn after a run of only 8 months. In 1896, the final Gilbert and Sullivan opera, The Grand Duke, appears at the Savoy. Its title character is the ruler of a tiny German principality and, despite his enormous wealth, is the cheapest man in the world. He is engaged to the Baroness von Krakenfeld, the cheapest woman in the world. And in one of the opera's most popular songs, they dream of their future married happiness and all the lovely things they can afford to buy, but choose not to.
As o'er a penny roll we sing, it is not reprehensive to think what joys our wealth would bring were we disposed to do the thing upon a scale extensive. There's rich love total thick and clear.
Perhaps we'll have it once a year.
You are an open-handed dear.
Mind you, it's expensive.
No doubt it is expensive.
How fleeting are the glutton's joys, with fish and foully lightly toys, and pays for such expensive tricks sometime as much as 2 and 6.
As 2 and 6.
As 2 and 6. Sometimes as much as 2 and 6.
Gives him no advantage, mind, for you and he have only dined, and you remain when one sits down a better man by half a crown.
By half a crown.
By half a crown.
Yes, 2 and 6 is half a crown. Then let us modestly marry, and rejoice with a dairy down dairy. For to laugh and to sing is extravagant spring, it's a joy economical very. Then let us be modestly merry, and rejoice with a dairy down dairy. For to laugh and to sing no extravagant spring, it's a joy economical very.
Although as you're of course aware, I never tried to hide it. I moisten my incipient fare with water which I can't bear.
No, I can't abide it.
This pleasing fact our souls we cheer with 50,000 pounds a year. We could indulge in table beer.
Get out.
We could, I tried it.
Yes, of course you've tried it. Oh, he who has an income clear of 50,000 pounds a year
can purchase all his fancy loves, conspicuous hats,
2 shilling gloves,
2 shilling gloves,
2 shilling gloves. Yes, think of that 2 shilling gloves.
Cheap shoes and ties of gaudy hue, and Waterbury watches too. And think that he could buy the lot were he a donkey.
Which he's not.
Oh, no, he's not.
Oh, no, he's not. That kind of donkey he is not. Then let us be modestly merry, and rejoice with a dairy down dairy. For to laugh and to sing is a rational thing, it's a joy economical very. Then let us be modestly merry, and rejoice with a dairy down dairy. For to laugh and to sing is a rational thing, it's a joy economical very.
The Grand Duke is a failure, running for only 5 months. The 2 partners separate without ever officially agreeing to do so. Sullivan continues to write operas for the Savoy with a variety of other collaborators, while Gilbert moves into semi-retirement, taking up the automobile and attending to his voluminous correspondence.
Dear Miss Bryce, it is my practice to decline to give my autograph to applications. Yet, on the other hand, one ought never to refuse anything to a young lady home for the holidays. So, you see, I am the victim of conflicting emotions. I know. We'll toss for it. Heads, I will send you my autograph. Tails, I write to tell you nothing will induce me to do anything of the kind. Now for it. It's tails, so I won't send it to you. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
Gilbert and Sullivan continue to meet occasionally, chiefly at opening nights or revivals of their operas at the Savoy. In 1900, as Sullivan is hard at work on his new opera, The Emerald Isle, a revival of Patience is a hit at the Savoy.
Dear Mrs. Cart, it wasn't my intention to come to the first night of Patience. But if it would really please Gilbert to have me there and to go on with him, I will come. Let us bury the hatchet and smoke the pipe of peace. Very truly yours, Arthur Sullivan.
Unfortunately, Sullivan's health takes a turn for the worse, and he is unable to attend.
Dear Mrs. Cart, pray tell Gilbert how very much I feel the disappointment. Good luck to you all. Very truly yours, Arthur Sullivan.
The next day, Gilbert is scheduled to depart for Egypt on his doctor's orders.
Dear Sullivan, I would be glad to come up to town to see you before I go, but unfortunately, in my present enfeebled condition, a carriage journey involves my lying down a couple of hours before I am fit for anything, besides stopping all night in town. I sincerely hope to find you all right again on my return, and the new opera running merrily. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert. P.S. The old opera woke up splendidly.
From the Diary of Arthur Sullivan, October 15th, 1900.
Lovely day. Frank Sellier left at 11:10. I am sorry to leave such a lovely day.
From the Times of London, November 22nd, 1900.
Sir Arthur Sullivan died early this morning at his flat at Queen's Mansions. His nephew Herbert Sullivan was with him at the end, as were his housekeeper and valet. The cause of death is reported to be bronchitis and cardiac failure, complicated by kidney disease. Sir Arthur Sullivan, the noted composer of oratorio, hymns, and opera, was 58 years of age.
Sullivan's nephew and heir, Herbert, serves on a commission to erect a monument to the composer on the Thames Embankment. In turn, he consults Gilbert.
Dear Mr. Sullivan, Marshall tells me that you want a quotation from one of the libretti to inscribe on your uncle's bust. What do you say to this from the Yeoman? Is life a boon? If so, it must befall that death, whene'er he call, must call too soon. It is difficult to find anything quite fitted to so sad an occasion, but I think this might do. Very truly yours, W.S. Gilbert.
Is life a boon? If so, it must befall that death, whene'er he call, must call too soon. Of course, is he give, yet one would pray to live another moon. What kind of plaint have I, who perish in July, who perish in July? it not a whit, nay, count it not a whit, that is well done with it. Soon as he's born, he short on means a sake to put the plague away, and I warn the captured fugitive my life most gladly give. I might have had to live another morn. I might have had to live another morn.
W.S. Gilbert outlives Arthur Sullivan, Richard D'Oyley Carte, and even Queen Victoria herself. In 1907, he is knighted by King Edward, an honor which he finds anything but overwhelming.
It is a tin pot, twopenny, halfpenny sort of distinction, but as no dramatic author as such has ever had it for dramatic authorship alone, I feel I ought not to refuse it. Still, this indiscriminate flinging about of knighthood is making me very nervous. It is quite possible they may give one to my butler. He is a very good fellow, and I'm afraid it will upset him.
On May 29, 1911, Gilbert has guests at his country estate, Grim's Dyke, where he has a lake. Miss Winifred Emery recalls the occasion.
Sir William Gilbert was teaching me to swim, and he invited me and a pupil of mine to Grim's Dyke on May 29th. My pupil was a much better swimmer than I and soon outdistanced me. Presently, she tried to touch bottom and found herself out of her depth. She shrieked out, "Oh, Miss Emery, I'm drowning!" I called to Sir William, who was on the steps, and he called to her not to be frightened and that he was coming. He swam out to her very quickly, and I heard him say, "Put your hands on my shoulders and don't struggle." This she did, but almost immediately she called out that he had sunk under her hands and had not come up. We both called to him but got no answer. Presently, the gardener came and got out of the boat, but it seemed a long time before they recovered the body.
From the Times of London, May 30th, 1911.
We record with much regret that Sir William Schwenk Gilbert, the poet and dramatic author, died suddenly yesterday afternoon of a heart affect while bathing at his home in Harrow Weald. It is believed that death was caused by syncope brought about by undue exertion in diving into the water. The lake is about 6 feet deep.
W.S. Gilbert had predicted that his works would die with him. "Posterity shall know as little of me," he wrote, "as I shall know of posterity." As for Arthur Sullivan, as early as 1885, the Musical Standard had predicted similar obscurity.
We must confess, we think it is a pity that a composer of such conspicuous talents should waste his present energies in writing music which is forgotten almost as soon as its immediate purpose is served. Pinafore is now almost forgotten. Patience and the Pirates of Penzance are rapidly fading from the public mind. The Mikado will soon follow them into oblivion. Sir Arthur Sullivan has made a name and a banker's balance, but his comic operas will probably die before their composer.
And indeed, for a decade after Gilbert's death, the operas go largely unperformed. The D'Oyley Carte Opera Company continues to tour the provinces, but it does not appear in London. In the dark days during and immediately after World War I, audiences and critics alike seem to find the operas old-fashioned. But in the 1920s, Rupert D'Oyley Carte brings his father's opera company back to London, and a Gilbert and Sullivan revival begins. A new generation learns to know and love the Savoy operas. especially after the cart company returns to America in the 1930s. Today, more than a century after Gilbert's death, there are more than 200 professional and amateur companies throughout the world performing primarily or exclusively the works of Gilbert and Sullivan. On stage, on records, on television, and in the movies, the operas are known and loved by millions. The works, destined to be forgotten as soon as their immediate purpose has been served, have become the world's most popular body of musical theater works and rank second only to Shakespeare in the history of English language theater. As in the operas themselves, the story of Gilbert and Sullivan ends with a most ironic twist.
Try we lifelong, we can never straighten our tangled strain. Why should we in vain endeavor, guess and guess and guess again?
Life's a pudding full of plums.
Kiss a canker that benumbs. Life's a pudding full of plums. Kiss a canker that benumbs. Wherefore waste of elocution on impossible solution? Life's a pleasant institution. Let us take it as it comes. Let us take it as it comes. Set aside the dull enigma, we shall guess it all too soon. Failure rings a kind of sting, all kind of sting, as we dance into June. Sing the violins drum, the sing the life, fill the cup, lest on sorrow we should stop. Up and skip to fantasies today, the hands of us down the real, and that's perhaps the only real, and we shrink from giving up. That's perhaps the only real, and we shrink from giving up. Then take it as it comes, take it as it comes. String the lyre, fill the cup, lest on sorrow we should stop.
By strife